Hello everyone, while I was on my break, Gaijin decided to announce that they are adding the Stalingrad to War Thunder Naval. I believe on the dev server it's sitting at 7.7 right now. And I really wanted to talk about it a lot while I was on vacation, but I had to wait till I got back obviously. So now you guys are getting a rather unscripted video that I'm just doing off my head, so apologies if I'm going to ramble about this. Now I have two major reasons why I think adding in all these project ships is a bit problematic, but before I get into that I do want to say I don't take issue with Stalingrad being added as a whole. It's more of a timing thing. We've had project ship after project ship after project ship added in at top tier for a very similar line, and they're very similar ships. And I think it's really crowding out historical ships and causing other issues with the game that I kind of want to specify. I'm not going to try to frame this as it's some bias or they're trying to make some line broken, because I don't really want to subscribe to that. I do like seeing more ships in the game. I know why project ships are needed, but I do see issues with them being added, even if those issues aren't as bad as something like Wargaming has with World of Warships, where it's just endless fake ships being tossed around everywhere. Whereas I think War Thunder's issue is more the pacing of their additions, and the fact that they're all kind of crowded around a similar tier, and lately they've all been fairly similar ships to where it's kind of an endless stream of the same thing, and they're all projects. But the first and the least controversial of these two is they're kind of crowding out the historical battleships that could be added. A lot of naval enthusiasts want to play these battleships for their history. Either they have an attachment to them, they like the stories of them, they like playing something that actually existed, and just know the history of the ships that they're sailing around and firing the guns of. There are a lot of ships that could be added that I think players would be extremely happy with, that are kind of being left out because instead they're focusing on adding these paper ships. Well, project ships I should say. I mean, there's easy examples of stuff that could be in some of the lines that are already left out. I mean, the US line doesn't have a tech tree Des Moines, something I've harped on for a while. The British line doesn't have a same ship as the Soviet line does, even though it is a British ship in the Royal Sovereign or Revenge class. These are just easy copy and paste that they could do to help fill out other lines, but instead we're getting another project ship. I mean, we don't have the North Carolina. I'm sure the British line could have a ton of stuff added because they don't even have a top tier. Ever since Leviathans came out a couple major patches ago, Britain hasn't had a true top tier, and I'm sure they have plenty of either project ships or ships that actually existed that could actually exist at the same tiers as Iowa, Yamato, and Sovietsky Soyuz. But we're not seeing that. They're not adding those to fill out the British line. Yes, we're getting something of a top tier for Britain this patch, but it's another 7.7. It's not a true top tier. So my problem with these project ships being added is it's taking up the time where they could be adding these historical ships or filling out these other lines that could just use those couple extra ships to actually be complete and actually compete at the top tier, rather than constantly being at the bottom of the tier, because anybody queuing into these top tier ships are just going to face these pseudo top tier ships that say the British line has and some of the minor nations have. So that's one of my issues with these project ships, just because they're taking up that dev time. We're not getting historical ships added because of that, and there's so much they could do. The British line could be so much more filled out because they did have a lot of ships and they had a lot of ideas. But my problem is, did we really need another Soviet project ship for an already heavy Soviet top tier when they could have finished out these lines or added in, like I said, North Carolinas, Des Moines. I'm sure the other nations have stuff that I'm forgetting, but that's one of my main problems with this. The other main problem that I have with this is a little bit more controversial, and this is where people are going to think that I'm trying to pick apart the Soviet line. But these project ships don't have balancing in the same sense of, I should say historical balancing in the sense of the other ships. You can bug report, say, Yamato, and say, hey, the armor's wrong, or the shell value's wrong, it should have this penetration, it should have this amount of explosive filler, the velocity should be this, the armor should be this, which Yamato's armor is still bugged, apparently. They still haven't fixed that. But these project ships, you can't do that, because there isn't any documentation of what they actually did in the water. It's what they possibly could be designed to do, and even if you have something that says, you know, this couldn't be built this way, or the shell is smaller than the Yamato's but has more explosive filler, or they couldn't build this at the time, or the guns would just wear out in 3 shots, and yes, those are all arguments that went against the Sovietsky Soyuz, I believe, just to parrot some of it, but it's stuff that really hampers the balancing of the game, because what can you do? You can't historically bug report these ships because nothing exists as literature to prove as a source for them to be accepted. You basically have to turn back to the wargaming way of balancing them and saying, hey, this is too strong, we're just going to either move it up in tier or tweak the numbers to where we think it might be a little bit more balanced. And I'm not a huge fan of that, because I did like the historical facts of War Thunder. I think they still have that, it's nothing slighted against them, but the problem is you cannot use historical balancing for ships that never saw the water and were never put together fully in real life. And it just starts arguments with the player base. That's why the Sovietsky Soyuz was so controversial when it got added, because so many people were just coming up with stuff that said, hey, this armor couldn't be made, the guns were unrealistic, the shells couldn't exist physically, just a litany of problems that flooded the forums and flooded the bug reports, and it just created a storm of problems for the bug report managers, in my opinion, to where we still haven't gotten bug fixes for Yamato. I'm sure the other ships that were added since then still have problems with them, but it kind of drowned out all the actual problems. So the balancing aspect of them and the argument problems is an issue, but I do see why we need these project ships. There's minor nations that do need the extra ships added in where they got partially done with something, and well, we need that to be added in to continue the line, otherwise it'll just end at 7.7 and they'll never get a ship above that until they someday move on to the Cold War and get guided missile destroyers and stuff like that with anti-ship missiles. So we do need them, they're a necessary evil, but there are problems with them. I mean, some of them are less problematic. I mean, you can look at the German line. They have the SMS Sachsen. Sorry if I'm butchering that. It's been a while since I went into ship pronunciations. But it's a Bayern that just has a couple more anti-aircraft guns taped on. That's all it is. It is a project ship, but that is all it is. There's no other difference. There is the Mackinson, where it is basically an in-between of a couple other ships in the line. The guns were kind of made, the ship was kind of made, but it is pretty realistic. It fits where it is in the event ship tree. But it's when you get to these high tier ones where they never really got built, they never saw the water, they never had really any documentation other than what they suspected they could do, and some probably propagandized numbers, I would say. Not trying to say that there's a bias there or anything, but the numbers could be propagandized or speculative, or just the shipbuilders saying they could do something that was fairly unreasonable. We see it all the time in all sorts of countries, but it's when you have that where there's problems and arguments and balancing issues, and in my opinion they just kind of cause a lot of issues. And really, while they are a necessary evil, this could just be solved by them slowing down the rollout of them. Fill out the other lines, add in some ships that actually existed, maybe give Britain a top tier. I mean, come on, that's pretty pathetic. But they could really just add in a couple more actual ships between rolling out these paper tigers at the top tiers. where it's just project shipped after project shipped after project shipped for the same nation, whereas you could maybe, give France one, give Britain a top tier, maybe give Italy a couple more bones so that they have a line that actually draws people's attention. There's so much more they could do where it wouldn't cause controversy and maybe wouldn't cause as many balancing issues, because they could actually have stuff to compare to, rather than say, there's a bunch of Sobetsky Soyuz on the other team, we've got a Bismarck, a Vanguard, and a Roma, and we're just about to get rolled into the floor. But that's my small rant on project ships. Apologies if it was a bit rambly. Like I said, no script, I'm just getting back into the swing of things. But do expect a couple more videos before the end of the month, and I still got to decide what I'm doing for 1,000 subscribers. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon. Good luck out there.